AI is supercharging attacks, and it is making AI the new attack surface. According to CrowdStrike, the fastest e-crime took just 27 seconds to commit. There's been an 89% increase in attacks by AI-enabled adversaries, a 42% increase in zero-day vulnerabilities that are exploited prior to public disclosure. A 40% of vulnerabilities are exploited by Nexus threat actors targeting edge devices such as firewalls, VPN gateways, and routers. And there's been a 266% increase in cloud-conscious intrusions by Nexus threat actors. Well, artificial intelligence is generally viewed as an enhancement to productivity, jobs, and innovation. In this episode of Security Disruptors, we ask a harder question. What happens when AI changes the balance of power in adversarial encounters? Through AI, states, companies, military intelligence agencies, corporations, criminals, and individuals are increasing their ability to analyze information, create deception, and act at scale. At the same time, the foundations of AI, which are chips, energy, computing power, data, and critical materials along with talent, are becoming strategically contested. AI is no longer simply a technology issue. It is an economic and national security issue. The key question is not simply how intelligent is AI becoming, it is who becomes more capable because AI exists, and are we moving fast enough to respond? Welcome to Security Disruptors, AI, Cyber, Financial, and National Security. We have an exceptional panel today. My co-host today is Jerry Bell, a cybersecurity expert with more than 30 years of experience working for IBM, and he is the founder and co-host of the Defensive Security podcast. Jerry also co-founded InfoSec.Exchange, which is an online community for cybersecurity professionals. Dr. Heather Hinton is a four-time Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, with 25 years of experience advising global organizations. A former IBM master inventor and distinguished engineer, she is a lecturer and board member with Harvard Extension School's Cybersecurity Master's Program. Her work focuses on how leaders adopt powerful technologies while maintaining accountability and control of risk. Dr. Alex Shulman is the Chief Information Security Officer for Kraken Technologies, an AI-powered platform supporting energy and utility companies around the world. She previously held senior cybersecurity roles at Ernst & Young, Citibank, and IBM, and she holds a PhD in computer science. Alex brings a critical infrastructure perspective. AI is increasingly connected to the systems that provide energy, water, and essential services. And Dr. Matt Lemon, who is a Chief Information Security Officer with 25 years of experience across banking, technology, and intelligence and government, was scheduled to join us today, but unfortunately a personal issue has arisen. Now, just before we go to the panel, for those of you online who are wishing to submit a question, please go to slido.com and use the code SECURITY. Jerry, and to each of our panelists, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You know, when I take a look at where we're at with the threat of AI-empowered security threats, I can't help but get a little bit of sense of deja vu, in the sense that if we go back to the beginning of when cybersecurity first arose as an issue, there was oh my gosh, what do we do? Are we a little bit in that same situation right now when we take a look at what AI generated or agentic AI is doing to the cybersecurity space? Jerry, I'll start with you, but I'll ask both Alex and Heather to address that same issue.
So absolutely, I would say it's probably understating the change that we've seen. We've been through major shifts in the past. For example, with the migration to cloud, right? That was a big sea change. going back even further, the migration from centralized computers to PCs. This is another example of a very major shift. I think this one is a lot more consequential from a security perspective, for sure.
Alex, Heather?
Yes, I can go next. And Jerry, I like your analogy to cloud and the internet. Both are very relevant because when we started with both technologies, there were many open gaps. Our internet was not protected. When we started with cloud, many of the default configurations were open. For example, public buckets and other things. And we need to learn from these experiences. And that's what we should be focusing on, scoping our AI environments, implementing all these lessons learned, because we know that things will be faster with AI. We cannot wait for 10 years to change our default settings. We need to change them as early as possible. We need to scope things as early as possible. And all of us need to be ready for this across all of our domains.
Heather? Oops, we've lost Heather's audio here for a second.
Yeah,
There we
sorry
go.
about that. I think about when we first moved onto the internet, when we were bringing banking online, for example, we had the luxury of time. Banks could take a year to figure out what were the rules. How was I going to validate a user? Was I going to support transactions from one bank to another bank or across accounts within an existing bank? And when we look at where we are now, things are happening so much faster. To Jerry and Alex's points, we don't have the luxury of taking a year to figure out what it is that we're going to do because people are already ahead of us. And so we have to really focus on what did we learn and how do we take that and use that to make sure that we are responding as quickly as we possibly can to this new, far more aggressive change.
So in the past, of course, we were human speed or intelligence combating or trying to defend against human intelligence. Well, now we have machine-driven speed. And do we have machine-driven defenses that we've been able to train to match the threat? Alex, I'll start with you, and then let's go through the panel.
Yes, would love to jump on this because actually this is a very hot topic that we're discussing with multiple security providers. Many of the tools, especially in the cloud, are already automated. So we do have mechanisms to respond quickly. It is just this decision on how to respond that is not easy, and every case is different. Another interesting, relevant topic that I would like to raise is deception. We have this entire space of deception where we've been developing technologies to trick threat actors, to access certain resources that are planted there just for them. And these tools were designed for humans. But now, most probably, this will not be relevant. So this is another interesting area that is changing in the industry right now. I'm very excited to see some of the technologies evolving in this space, but it is essentially this new way of decepting AI agents that we need to develop. I'm very hopeful that we'll see more solutions in this space. But thank you for raising this topic. I think it is very critical to adjust all of our tools to be suitable to detect threat actors operating with these new technologies.
So, Alex, I want to come back to you for just one second. You talked about the creation of deception. Why is this such a fundamentally important element in the ability of somebody to attack? Why does that expose vulnerabilities the way that it does? Because there's a part of me that goes, well, with machine-driven attacks, we can maybe bypass the human element. But what you're saying is, no, we still have to, in essence, co-opt a human operator, and the best way to do that is to deceive them. So just to complete this topic or this thought about deception.
Yes, that's what we've been doing in the past. In the past, we've been decepting humans. We still don't know what will be needed in the future, but we know that we need technologies that can decept both humans and agents. So the industry is evolving in this space. I would just welcome all the security providers to think about this topic and test their technologies both for humans and agents.
Right. Heather?
So I wanted to go back a little bit to the responding at machine speed. We absolutely can. The question, I think, is many people are nervous about doing that. There are some spaces where we're pretty comfortable. And if I see something happening on somebody's workstation, I have no problem taking it offline. If I see something happening with access by a user, I'm probably okay shutting that access off and making them start all over again. If I see something happening within my production environment and I'm running a SaaS offering, I'm going to think long and hard. And I think that many organizations have not yet had the very, very difficult conversations of, in order to respond at machine speed, am I prepared to shut down and take something offline and make it no longer be available? And the difficult conversation of availability versus security is one that in some areas, critical infrastructure, people have had those conversations because we understand what happens when the energy grid goes down, right? We understand what happens when public transit goes down. We don't understand what happens when SaaS technologies go down to the same extent, and we haven't figured out how to have those conversations, or the business hasn't come to terms with the fact that there will be an impact on them that they just haven't had to deal with in the past. And those are really important conversations that organizations have to be prepared to have, because without that understanding and that unified agreement, we're not going to be given permission to have that machine speed response.
What I find interesting about your response right there is you talked about you would make a decision about this workstation or that particular element. You were making those decisions. How do you train your digital twin or your agent to be able to think the way that you do in response to an attack?
We're already there.
Okay.
Tools have been doing that for years now, actually. And so in some areas, and this is, I think, one of the things maybe we should sort of highlight, AI has been helping us in security for probably about a decade. It's just, we used to call it machine learning. And we're getting better at it now, and we're bringing in autonomy. But there are absolutely tools out there that will take a machine offline, will take your workstation offline, and that will break a session. So we do know how to do that. That piece I'm not worried about. It's the giving something agency within my production environment that just, quite frankly, still scares me.
Jerry?
I think this is a really important point to highlight, because this permeates kind of all up and down the stack. We typically are very focused as a IT function and as a business vertical, right? We're very focused on availability, and I think where we have to get to is balancing that with protecting the environment from emerging threats that are perhaps operating faster than we're able to respond to. And so I think Heather's point is right on, that we've been doing this for quite some time. We've encoded these tools with business logic on how to respond, but that tends to be more at the micro, not necessarily at the macro. And I think that's, if we think about this at a higher level, how do we leverage these technologies to protect the power grid, for example, when that might require shutting part of the power grid off, when that is kind of an antithetical thought to the whole point of the power grid in the first place. So I think it's wrestling with those kind of larger business challenges that we have to wrestle with, because it can't only be about availability going forward. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to fully leverage these technologies.
So when we take a look at the ability of people to attack complex systems that each of you are in charge of, it took a pretty sophisticated level of understanding and probably a team of people to be able to do that. What has AI brought to the equation that expands the scope of threat and invites other bad actors into the into the arena where they are attacking infrastructure, banks, individuals, corporations? Alex, why don't I come back?
It's low.
Okay,
Heather, it's lowered the cost of entry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just the simplest way to put it. You used to your point, you used to have a lot of experience. You needed to know everything that you could possibly know about the entire stack, the operating system, the network, the protocols, the vulnerabilities. You had to know where were the honeypots that Alex was talking about. Where were the deceptive technologies? How do I avoid them? When I'm moving through the system, where am I going to leave breadcrumbs that a defender can go and find and pick up on, right? And I had to have all of that in my head. Yeah. Now, the AI has it, and if we think about it, it's now like a chess player. It can see 100 moves ahead. It can do multiple things in parallel that a person couldn't do. So it's lowered the cost of entry. It's made it so that you don't have to have that level of expertise, and that is one of the things that makes it quite scary.
Alex?
Yes, I would also like to raise the topic of rethinking how we're protecting our systems. Our traditional approach from 20 years ago was perimeter security. And now it is much easier to access these networks, and then the threat actors can propagate. So we need to rethink what are we protecting, focus on the assets that we are protecting, and then focus on the specific detection mechanisms over these assets. Just assuming exactly what Heather mentioned, that things may be moving faster, they may be more threat actors, and we need to be very strategic in what are we focusing on. And we need to use AI both for our benefit, and we should be welcoming others through bug bounty programs. And I'm sure all the companies are seeing this, that bug bounty programs are also now receiving more alerts, and many of them are AI generated. Mm-hmm. So just taking all this into account, analyzing this data, and all of us need to constantly raise all of the defenses and using all the available tools.
Jerry?
I think this is a very broad area. I really like. I want to go back to something that Alex said earlier, because I think it's an important thing. We have to improve the fidelity of the intelligence that we have, and what Alex was describing with this deception is, I think, very important. Typically, our defenses, both things like honeypots and firewalls and IDS, intrusion detection systems, are really aimed at identifying human-derived attacks. But that's not where we're at now. What we're seeing are, I like to describe it as democratization of advanced attacks. We've got an entire industry of security startups that are investigating complex attacks and writing about them in their blogs, and I think that's great. That helps the industry move forward. But at the same time, it is providing a roadmap for attackers to follow. And in the past, this has required a lot of very specific knowledge that is no longer required. And so now it really just takes somebody with some imagination and accessibility to a properly trained model to pull off pretty complex attacks that used to be the domain of intelligence agencies. And so I think we've really got to improve the ability for us to detect these things happening at speed and then pair that with response.
So we've seen over the course of the evolution of cybersecurity that the CISO, even though you're part of the executive team, is kind of off to the side, and the rest of the board goes, or executive team goes, you're paranoid, and and you're getting in the way of what I want to do in my own innovation and my production and whatnot. With an understanding about what AI or machine-driven speed intrusions are starting to impact organizations or have the potential to, do you believe that there's going to be a greater acceptance within the C-suite to be able to say, okay, we're going to build into systems and we're going to give you the resources that you need? And I recognize we're talking about complex organizations and large organizations that have those resources. We can come back to this question when it starts to get to small and medium-sized organizations, what they need to be aware of. But do you believe that as a result of this heightened awareness and the role that AI can play in generating attacks, that there's going to be a greater openness by executives to say, okay, we really need to pay attention to this? Heather, I saw you scoff when I started
Yeah.
to.
No, it was the sympathetic laugh. I'm going to say there's a little bit of I don't want to say disingenuity in your question, but the large organizations have always had the budget.
Yeah.
The large organizations have always had the concern. They've always had the teams that are large enough. They've been able to afford the skills to go and look at this, right? And that's not to say that they haven't had the same, cash constraints, skills constraints that small to mediums have, but they are better positioned to deal with this. My huge concern is for all of those small to medium businesses out there that don't have a security team, that don't have the budget, that don't have the history of doing this. And they're critical, right? What is it in the United States? 90% of the business runs out of the GDP comes from small to medium or something ridiculous like that. Somebody can fact check me. But the amount that small to medium contributes to the economy in pretty much every country out there is phenomenal. And those are the companies that at the same time are struggling to understand how do they all of a sudden pay attention to something that they've been able to because the business has said it's not necessary, I'm not part of the attack chain, I'm not important enough, all of these sorts of things. I don't have to pay attention to it. Now they do. And they're kind of stuck. And that's where I am personally hugely concerned, because those are the people that need the help the most. And those are the people that have also just got the biggest mountain to climb to get there.
So, Alex, is the answer technology that helps those small to medium sized businesses, or do we need to actually sort of go back to a more rudimentary or less technological way in which we're going to be functioning so that those small and medium-sized businesses can protect themselves?
Yes, let's get back to Jerry's comment about cloud and what can we learn from our cloud transformation that applies to AI.
Yeah.
When we move to cloud, the common phrasing that I used to say many years ago, and all of my team members used everywhere, is use the cloud to secure the cloud. Because every new technology requires new controls. And especially modern technologies have many of these controls built in. So we first of all need to properly use these new technologies, both cloud and AI, with all the hardening mechanisms that they have. And then we have the security tooling above these native controls. And this is what I think is actually helpful to smaller businesses that don't have dedicated security teams, because just by properly using technologies, modern technologies that they have, they may actually be doing better than 20 years ago, where technologies were sold separately, and then they had to buy firewalls and other tools separately. And if they didn't have these teams, they were not protected. So that's maybe my message to smaller businesses. just to ensure that your engineering and IT teams are using what they may already have available. Because
So
a critical starting point.
you're telling those small and medium businesses trust the cloud because they have the resources to be able to protect you.
In the cloud, as you know, there is what is called the shared responsibility model. The cloud provider is responsible to secure the cloud. So that's the first piece of it. But these are the companies using the cloud that are responsible to properly set up all the controls using the tools that the cloud provider is giving them. So it is, I wish I could say trust the provider and everything will be fine. No, there is a lot of work that needs to be done to set all these controls, and it is not a one-time exercise. The teams need to constantly monitor, constantly set up, and this is exactly what the security tools are offering. They're offering this continuous monitoring so that if something is misconfigured, they will be alerting everyone, and they will be treating these misconfigurations in the same way as vulnerabilities. This is also another critical change that was brought by cloud, but it is very relevant in the context of AI because our weaknesses are not just these well-known CVs with numbers, but anything that may be misconfigured or any other weakness that may be available in the environment. And this is exactly what cloud security tools are providing to the customer.
Right. So Jerry, yes, trust the cloud, but it's incumbent upon the operator to make sure they are enabling the tools appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. I was for quite some time actually responsible for the security of a very large cloud provider, and that was a common problem, right? There's an expectation that, hey, we've moved our environment to the cloud provider has it, but that's really not the right way to think about it. You still retain, as the consumer, a lot of responsibility for securing your workloads. You know what I find interesting as I listen to the discussion here, it reminds me, especially something that Alex had said. It reminds me of a shift that happened probably 10 or 12 years ago, especially with the smaller companies when we saw the rise of ransomware. And I kind of think about the information security, landscape as two eras. There's kind of the before ransomware era and the after ransomware era. The before ransomware era, you were able to hide, right? You could say we aren't a target, we aren't important, we're a flower shop, we are, we're not particularly important strategically to anybody. And in the after ransomware era, it's just that you're there, right? And I think one of the challenges I see going forward is that concept is being accelerated and expanded as a result of AI. So, in the past, ransomware actors are basically taking advantage of whatever weakness, whatever foothold they can get, and they're having, relatively good luck and success in doing that. But with AI, we should expect that is going to happen, much more aggressively, but also at a larger scale, and perhaps the 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 harms, the perils that happen as a result of these attacks also start to evolve away from simply the financially driven ransomware that we've seen in the past to something perhaps more destructive. And when you start to think about the capability of actors scaling that up, not just one business at a time, but much more pervasively, like we've seen recently with some of the big SaaS providers being attacked. I think this is where we as an industry really have to uh, find our way through the forest.
So in an AI driven or powered cyber attack world, what remains the weakest link in the whole security chain? Alex?
I think it's not a single link in the chain. because companies need to constantly pay attention to everything. I wish we could say there is just this small thing to pay attention to. No, we need to use AI. We need to use tools to actually give us this view on everything. And I hope that security teams will be able to benefit from AI to get this visibility on all of the links that are necessary, and not just one link. I think that's exactly the change, so that we will know more, and security teams will have better visibility. And I'm hopeful that the tools will continue to evolve. We're already seeing big changes in the industry. Many of the security providers are releasing these AI-powered features. So we're looking forward to adopting more and more in this space.
I'll be a little bit more direct in my question, because I think that as far as technology protecting technology, those systems function and continue to improve well. We've got the human element, and I worry that the human element, can we keep up with what we're being presented with?
Are you asking about the defenders or the people who may be tricked and pulled into the incidents?
Well, where we become the point of entry or the weakest line of security. I believe that humans become even more vulnerable when they are facing the onslaught of AI-generated and continually improving quality of attacks.
Yeah, so essentially, it will be easier to trick people with AI. Is this what you're asking about? Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, let me jump in and try to answer. Like I was going to say, it used to be that the weakest link was the human, right? And I don't really think that anybody would disagree, right? It was always the human at some point that was getting in there. Now, I think to what Alex was saying, there is no weakest link. It's the weakest ecosystem is actually sort of more about how to think about it, right? It is how does my whole ecosystem hang together? When I think about how to stop an attack, I go back to something called the MITRE attack framework. It comes out of MITRE, and it's quite fantastic. And when I look at the MITRE attack framework, what I'm now looking at is where are all of the places that I can go and break what we call the kill chain? How do I go and break the attack chain? And that's now where I need to be focusing on. So I don't know that thinking about the weakest link is the right way to go anymore. Mm-hmm. There is still absolutely a weak link that comes from the human, for things like the identity side of the house. But I think that's different than what you're asking about, Stu. But I'm not 100% certain.
Mm-hmm. Jerry,
I think I know where you're going, and I would say humans definitely are a challenge, but maybe not in the same way that we're normally talking about them, right? A lot of the problems that we are seeing today are avoidable problems, and they arise as a result of the way that we've designed our environments, the way we've constructed our controls, the way we design our business processes in a way that allows something bad to happen as a result of someone clicking on the wrong email or link. I think the one reality that we have to come back to is that while AI is kind of scary and it's new, it isn't magic. It is taking advantage of the same sorts of things that we've been dealing with, since time immemorial. The basics still matter. They matter more now than ever. If I go back to the cloud analogy, one of the biggest challenges that I've run into, and I see it, pretty much everywhere, is that the proliferation of really complex technologies and people not understanding it. By people, I don't mean user level people. I mean IT administrators and architects and whatnot, not fully understanding all of the implications of decisions and settings and whatnot that they are making, and it is those things that AI is often taking advantage of. There is certainly an aspect of this where we're seeing some of these new models being able to find previously undisclosed or discovered vulnerabilities and taking advantage of those. But I still think that if you look across, that's still the edge case. It's still that alone shouldn't provide an ability for an AI agent to completely decimate your business. There should be a thoughtful security architecture that you've built into your environment. So I answer your question, what is the weakest link? I think it's our ability to design resilient systems. So
what's the next iteration? What's the next phase? Before we were on live, Heather, you were talking about the iterative improvements, but with every better mousetrap comes a better mouse. I guess vigilance and remaining committed to being ahead of the onslaught becomes paramount.
Yeah, and for the audience who wasn't there for our pre-conversation, right? We all know you build a mousetrap, nature will build a better mouse, get a better mousetrap, build a better mouse. And what used to happen is that we had time. We had time to build the mousetrap, to see what happened, to watch how the mouse adapted to it. They figured out how to get the cheese or not get the cheese. We had time to then build a new mousetrap, and we had time, right? These cycles took time. And so we had time to adapt. Now the cycles, we don't have time to adapt in those cycles. And I think that that's fundamental for us, is learning how to work that much faster as defenders. And to Jerry's point, right, we've got these incredibly complex environments, especially in places where you've got a legacy environment, where you've got some stuff that's, what we call on-prem, some that's in a cloud, you've got this hybrid world, you've got the firewalls that you talked about. When you've got these incredibly complex environments, we have to figure out how to be much, much better at understanding them. And that's where AI for the defender is going to become really important, because that's how we're going to get to be able to compete in our part of the mousetrap, mouse cycle that is just continuing to accelerate.
Mm-hmm. So we're into our last 8 or 9 minutes here of our broadcast window. What is the message that you want to send out to anybody who is looking at this saying, okay, how do I get better at this? How do I defend myself? Where do I go to make sure that I don't become the victim of an attack? Jerry, can I start with you?
Sure. I go back to something Heather mentioned, and I apologize for stealing your thunder, but a lot of these issues have been thought about by very smart people, and so adopting frameworks like MITRE will be very helpful to you. It's a very nuanced problem. Going back to your question, what would I want people to understand? I would say the basics still matter. If there is an opportunity to leverage technology, it should be to help make sure that you are designing your environments in a safe and secure manner, that you've not left the back door open on accident because you didn't know that there was a door there. So that's my input there.
Where did they find that information, though, Jerry? Because I sit here and go, all right, as a small business owner, how do I find access to that information that I know is going to be able to provide a solution for me? Because I'm now aware of the fact that I could be vulnerable. In the past, I might have gone, doesn't apply to me, but it does now. Where do I find those sources of credible and reliable information that are going to give me those tools?
The governments are helping, right? Government of Canada has some great sites, GCHQ, NIST in the US, the Australian government with some of their standards. So there's a lot of work out there to help the SMBs. NIST, for example, has an SMB community. And the great thing about these, and thank you, internet, is that they're available to everybody. So I can go and read, I can sit in Canada and go and look at what GCHQ is telling people. So there absolutely are sites to go and help people to learn about what to do. But to Jerry's point, right, it's really going back to basics, back to the fundamentals, and making sure that you've got the right controls in place, that you know who your users are, that you are properly authenticating them, that you've given them a secure workstation. I can go down a whole technical path there, but the fundamentals actually haven't changed. What's changed is that decisions that we would make, even honestly 2 years ago, the business would say, I'm going to live with this risk. It's okay. I'm willing to pay the fine. It's not going to happen to me. I accept this risk. Those decisions no longer hold water, right? We cannot make our risk posture, our risk tolerance has to change. And we have to be more aware that, now it truly, truly is not if, it is when, right? This is something that CISOs say and security people say, but now it's more, that phrase is more believable to everybody because of what they're seeing in the news. So my message to people is, so actually, despite all of this, right, this is absolutely something that we can win, right? We just have to be dedicated. We have to go back to first principles. We have to be willing to make decisions that 2 years ago we would never have made, that the business would not have supported. We need the business now to get on board with the impact of availability versus security, availability versus safety. And we have to be having those conversations, but we can have those conversations in a very productive manner. And we can use AI to help us be much better at telling the story and then at remediating our environments.
So, Alex, how important in some cases is it that we actually go back to taking technology out of the equation and get to know the person like face to face that we're dealing with, so that we actually can have some faith and trust in they are who they say they are?
Yes, that's a great point, because there is nothing better than human trust. So the more we can meet in person, the more we can build these personal relationships, the better, because we need to trust our employees, our providers, and contractors who are supporting us. So the more we can meet, the more successful everyone is. And I would recommend maybe making progress in parallel in two directions. One is just reconnecting and getting back to human interactions. Second, where we cannot do this, where we do need to have operations offshore and we cannot meet in person, bringing the technology, bringing AI to actually protect companies in case there is something suspicious, and just helping companies to better detect these cases. So making progress in both directions, getting back to trust, but also having technologies to better detect, run in this continuous way. Security is not a one-time exercise. Doing quarterly reviews is not enough anymore. This is why we need these tools to be constantly running and constantly alerting, and then AI analyzing this, and when there is something critical, humans should be stepping in.
Jerry, I'd like you to share with our audience the example that you were giving to me earlier about you can't look at somebody on video and assume that they are who they say they are. And how, in an AI-generated world, do you discern whether or not the person that you're talking to online is actually that person?
Yeah, this is the classic arms race. There are and there have been quite a few very widely publicized cases here in the U.S. especially. I think it's a global problem though, with people from North Korea applying for and landing remote IT jobs, and in the interviews, they're using technology to on the fly make their appearance appear to be more Western, and makes their voice sound more Western and their mannerisms sound more Western. And it has been over the course of the past couple of years, there's, we as an industry have really been struggling with how to stay ahead of this challenge, and interviewers who are astute have developed like successively different techniques. It started off by asking the candidate to show an outlet on the wall, because if they're in an Asian country, the outlets are going to appear very differently than they are in the US or in Canada or in the UK or in the EU. But that quickly became not very useful, because the model, the AI technology they were using just masked that. And now the state of the art is actually to have people wave fingers in front of their face, because the AI models at the moment can't handle that. And so you can actually see as they do that, it is in fact an AI facade that's being put over their faces. But the reality is that is effective at the moment, but tomorrow or next week or next month, they will have fixed that problem, and then we'll have to adapt and move on to something else. And so I think what Alex was saying is becoming increasingly important, but I think we also have to be cognizant that that isn't the end, right? I personally had an experience, and this was 15 years ago, where I was hiring people in a foreign country, and I came to understand that they weren't trying to mask their appearance. It was actually literally a different person. It was like an agent who was a specialist in applying for and landing roles of a certain type, and then the person who actually showed up to do the job was a very different person. And so I think we have to be cognizant that this is an arms race, and even if we take the next step, there's going to be a response to that.
I think about the case of the UK-based company that one of their executives was in Hong Kong, was on a live video call, and he believed that he was talking to the CFO at the company, and he was convinced by this deep fake to transfer $25 million.
Yes.
This is the level of sophistication that we're working against. Heather, you're familiar with that case?
Yeah, we all are.
Well, everybody
but
is.
You know
yeah.
what? But look, there's actually something really kind of worthwhile remembering, right? The majority of this, it really is still all about money, right? Somebody wants to go and make money. The number of cases where it's something more nefarious than money isn't it. It's grins and giggles because I get to go and do something fun, or it's money, and that also gives me a certain amount of hope, because we know how to deal with that. And at the end of the day, it's money. It's not somebody's life, right?
Yeah, which is good. Closing thoughts from each of you. Alex, can I start with you?
Yes, thank you. Maybe just to call out to all of the providers, we need to learn from mistakes that were made in the beginning of cloud, and we need all the providers who are now shipping AI technologies to think about the settings. We want all of the permissions by default be restricted, because if they're rushing to release their tools and the permissions are just too wide, this may trigger incidents later on. So all of the tech providers, AI providers, please pay attention to this, and we'd love to work with everyone to restrict this.
That's a very practical closing thought. Jerry?
I would say stay focused on the actual problem. We are in an interesting period right now where I think the news is being dominated by AI threats, and it's certainly an evolving space. Meanwhile, most of us are being robbed blind by much more contemporary, less sophisticated adversaries. We have to worry about both, but I would say don't let yourself get distracted too much at least by news cycles that are perhaps intended to drive stock prices versus how you inform the development and operation of your security program.
And Heather?
I'm going to take this as the opportunity to actually be hopeful, right? We know that we're not going to solve this on our own. We need technology vendors, but we need the community. The security community needs each other. And if this allows us to reach out, to share ideas, to share experiences, and leverage what everybody else is learning and experience so that we can get better and faster without having to have the same, good, bad, or indifferent experiences, then I think that this is something that will ultimately help us be better and be on the winning side, as it were. And so my takeaway is that we will never have an opportunity to force ourselves to collaborate with each other the way we do now. And we really need to be taking advantage of that.
It's interesting in the piece, Who the Hell Wants to Be a CISO? There was talk about when the cybersecurity community was first coming together, everybody worked together because it was so new. And in a way, what you're saying is we're coming back to that. We need to work together. We need collaboration. And it's not just big organizations. It's military, it's government, it's smaller organizations, it's intelligence agencies. We all need to be working together so that we can help to ensure that there is open and free markets, and that the disruption that's caused by these attacks is minimized.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you, all of you. An extraordinary panel. And to anybody who's watching, please know that this has been recorded. We're going to be putting it out online, and we will also be releasing social media clips with information that can help you in your own journey to make your organizations as secure as possible. We'll be back in September with our next edition of Security Disruptors, when we take a look at what are critical infrastructure organizations doing to make sure that they are able to provide the greatest amount of security so that those infrastructure services can continue to be provided in a world where they are under attack. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in September.